Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, will have much more on markets in a minute. First, we want to get the latest on the aftermath of Hurricane Milton. Bloomberg's John Tucker is following that and joins us now. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Nathan. It could take days to assess the full extent of the damages. So far, 10 people are dead. Millions are without power, but it could have been a lot worse. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
The storm was significant, but thankfully this was not the worst case scenario. The storm did weaken before landfall.
Much of the worst damage came from wind rather than water. There were at least 38 reports of tornadoes. Milton's 120-mile-an-hour winds tossed a crane into a St. Petersburg building. The roof of Tropicana Field was shredded. President Biden called on Congress to return to Washington immediately to pass additional funding for disaster aid and made a vow to the people of Florida.
I promise you, you have to pick up the pieces still. I want you to know we'll do everything in our power to help you put pieces back together.
A disaster modeler with NK Research says the damage could cost $75 billion. About 2.5 million homes and businesses remain without electricity. Walt Disney World and Comcast Orlando theme parks, they say they plan to reopen today. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, John, thank you. Now we want to get the latest from the campaign trail. Former President Trump is making a bid to boost the auto industry. In a speech at the Economic Club of Detroit, he promised to make interest on car loans tax deductible.
This will stimulate massive domestic auto production and make car ownership dramatically more affordable for millions and millions of working American families.
Donald Trump also promised to renegotiate the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement to prevent Chinese cars made in Mexico from crossing the border. And he took a swipe at his host city, saying the whole country will end up like Detroit if Kamala Harris is elected president. The vice president seized on that remark.
My opponent, Donald Trump, yet again has trashed another great American city when he was in Detroit, which is just a further piece of evidence on a very long list of why he is unfit to be president of the United States.
Kamala Harris spoke on her way to a rally in Arizona last night. The vice president also appeared at a town hall in Las Vegas with Univision in a bid to shore up the Latino vote. She defended her record on immigration and took questions from voters frustrated by rising grocery prices and health services that have become difficult to procure.
Now, Karen, let's get to the latest from the Middle East. Israel has stepped up strikes on Beirut in its campaign against Hezbollah. That's as it continues to decide how to retaliate against Iran for its ballistic missile attack last week. Israel's Security Cabinet held a meeting last night, but an Israeli official tells Bloomberg it ended with no decision made. Bloomberg's Stuart Livingston Wallace says that should not be taken as a surprise.
I think it's just standard procedure, and I don't think we should read anything more into it than that. And they came out of it saying that the final decision is going to be taken by the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister, which again is, pretty standard.
Bloomberg's Stuart Livingston Wallace reports President Biden warned Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu against targeting Iran's oil and nuclear sites a day before the Security Cabinet meeting.
Well, Nathan, Elon Musk has unveiled the long-awaited prototype of Tesla's Cybercab. At an event in Burbank, California last night, the billionaire said production may start in 2026 with the vehicle priced under $30,000.
You can think of it like individualized mass transit. The average cost of a bus per mile for a city, not the ticket price because that is subsidized, but the average price is about $1 a mile. Whereas the cost of Cybercab, we think probably over time, from the operating cost is probably going to be around 20 cents a mile.
And Musk also showcased a robo-van concept, which he says could transport 20 people at once. Analysts say Musk's presentation lacked technical details and glossed over topics including regulation on whether the company will own and operate its own fleet of cybercabs. Shares of Tesla are down almost 6% this morning.
And Karen, investors are gearing up to watch shares of big banks. We get earnings from two of them this morning, and we get a preview now from Bloomberg Wall Street correspondent Shonali Bassick.
JPMorgan and Wells Fargo kick off an earnings season for the big banks, and it's the first one since the Federal Reserve cut interest rates for the first time after its historic rate hiking cycle. Now, what's unclear is how that will unlock lending as interest rates become lower eventually across different credit products. The yield curve has also been steepening, which is generally good for banks, but it's been fluctuating. And JPMorgan and Wells Fargo's outlook will be just as important as the numbers themselves. In New York, I'm Shonali Bassick for Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Shonali, thank you. Well, also out this morning, another key reading on inflation. Producer prices for the month of September are forecast to have risen 0.1%. We get a preview from Bloomberg's Michael McKee.
The upside surprise from CPI is not expected to carry over to the prices producers are charging. The consensus forecast is for a 0.1 percentage point drop in the rates of both headline and core inflation. If verified, that would give Fed officials and investors more hope that the September rise in consumer prices was a one-off. One thing to watch, prices for trade services, essentially retailer and wholesaler margins. Was the September CPI bump an effort by companies to protect those margins at a time when the cost of labor continues to rise? Michael McKee, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Mike, thanks. So, Fed policymaker Austin Goolsbee is praising progress on inflation and the labor market. Speaking with Bloomberg's Odd Lots podcast before the latest consumer price index, the Chicago Fed president said he does not see convincing evidence the economy is overheating, despite the stronger September jobs report.
All of the measures broadly have been showing a labor market that is cooling from a white-hot level to something like sustainable full employment. I haven't seen anything that is yet convincing that there's a new trend that we're not stabilizing at full employment.
Chicago Fed President Austin Goolsbee. To hear the full conversation, head over to the Bloomberg Odd Lots podcast.
Well, over in Europe, Nathan, the UK economy returned to growth in August, putting Prime Minister Keir Starmer on track for a modest recovery before worries about his first budget began to weigh on sentiment. Gross domestic product rose 0.2% from July, and that's in line with economist estimates.
And back in the U.S., Karen, Boeing is taking a harder line with union representatives as the strike hits the 1-month mark. The plane maker has filed unfair labor practice charges, saying the other side has bargained in bad faith and undermined its own deal. The union has said it's willing to talk, though Boeing, quote, needs to meet us at the table.
Time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Breaking news. A Japanese group of atomic bomb survivors has just won the Nobel Peace Prize. Nihon Hidankyo is the only national organization of A-bomb survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. It was formed by organizations. It was also founded in August of 1956 during the Second World Conference against A and H bombs. Of course, we'll have more on this story throughout the entire day. A deadly incident at a tourist attraction west of Colorado Springs. Colorado's governor says he's relieved that 12 people who were trapped in the Molly Kathleen mine in Cripple Creek have been rescued. However, one person died and 4 were injured when the trolley car that goes down the elevator at the tourist attraction malfunctioned. Teller County Sheriff Jason Meixell.
It's going to take a full investigation to know what really went wrong. Accidents happen when you're dealing with this type of machinery.
Sheriff Meixell says those stuck were 1,000 feet below ground for hours. No word on what caused the malfunction. Ethel Kennedy, who lost her husband Robert F. Kennedy to an assassination, has died. She was by her husband's side when the senator was killed while running for president in 1968. As a student at Manhattanville College in New York, she shared a room with Gene Kennedy. Ethel was 17 when she met Gene's brother Robert on a skiing vacation in 1945.
He was standing in front of an open fireplace, and I just turned around. I walked in the door and turned and saw him and thought, whoa.
Ethel and Robert married in a lavish ceremony 5 years later. Former President Barack Obama called Ethel Kennedy a dear friend with a passion for justice. Ethel Kennedy was 96. Finally, yesterday was World Mental Health Day, a day people are asked to prioritize their own well-being. Dozens of students at Penn State Scranton took the day off from school to do just that, including this student.
I know that a lot of students are overwhelmed at this time of year because of midterms and all of our exams and everything.
About 62% of people globally report experiencing stress that affects their daily life. Global news 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update, brought to you by Tri-State Audi. Here's John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Two teams have so far advanced to the League Championship Series, and those teams are the Mets and the Yankees, who won 3-1 at Kansas City, won the series 3-1. They started Game 4 quickly, scoring before there was an out. Juan Soto driving home Gleyber Torres, who then drove in a run in the fifth. An inning later, another run-scoring hit for Giancarlo Stanton, the hero of Game 3. He plated Aaron Judge, who, as it was well documented, had a quiet series, but Judge doubled in that sixth inning, and the Yankee captain now happy to be moving on.
Well, it means everything. You know, we haven't, since I've been here with the Yankees, we haven't secured a pennant, so you know, the group that we have, how special this is. Like, there's excited for this opportunity. It's going to be something special, and you know, what a series for the boys this DS was against a good Royals team. So excited about the CS, that's for sure.
Monday night at the stadium, they'll host either Cleveland or Detroit. Guardians stayed alive, winning 5-3. They'll host the Tigers in a decisive Game 5 tomorrow night. Game 5 tonight in the NLDS. Padres and Dodgers in L.A., and the winner then hosts the Mets. Game 1 Sunday. Also for baseball, Minnesota Twins are for sale. They've only had two owners since 1919 when they were in Washington. The Griffith family, and for the past 40 years, the Pohlad family. The team's been valued at just under $1.5 billion. Week 6 began in the NFC West in Seattle. 49ers led all the way, beat the Seahawks 36-24. 3 touchdown passes for Brock Purdy, 2 to George Kittle after a 76-yarder to Deebo Samuel. Both teams are 3-3. Wild start to the WNBA Finals in Brooklyn. The Liberty blew an 18-point lead, trailed by 1 with less than a second to go when Breanna Stewart got fouled. She made the first free throw but missed the second, and the Minnesota Lynx won Game 1 of the best of 5 in overtime, 95-93. Game 2 Sunday afternoon, also at Barclays. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Karen Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. The wait is finally over for Tesla's self-driving robo-taxi, or at least to see what it looks like. Elon Musk has unveiled the prototype of what he is now calling Cybercab, saying it could begin production in the next 2 years.
Yes, and you will be able to buy one. And we expect the cost to be below $30,000.
Tesla CEO Elon Musk at the We Robot event in Southern California last night. This morning, we are joined by Bloomberg's Kriti Gupta. Kriti, good morning. We just heard the promises from Elon Musk about Cybercab. Production in the next 2 years, maybe. A price point under $30,000, maybe. Look at the stock reaction, maybe. Isn't enough for investors, apparently.
Good morning, Nathan. I'm sure a lot of folks with $30,000 are looking at this Cybercab to throw that money at. But it's an interesting one in terms of that price point, because a lot of people were expecting in the lead up to this a much more expensive price point. And remember, that's one of the key things that Tesla has struggled with in terms of pricing its EVs, specifically in the United States. The idea here simply being that Americans don't want to spend that much for an EV. And if a gas guzzler is cheaper, they're going to go for the cheaper option. Now it looks like that's something Tesla's addressing in some of their other products, which again, $30,000 is quite an attractive price point as well. Nathan, it's not enough to impress the investor standpoint, though, or the stock, I should say. The shares are dropping pre-market by just shy of about 6%. So you are seeing it take a little bit of a beating. The idea here simply being, how do you make money off of this? How viable is this in terms of helping your bottom line? Right now, it doesn't seem like that much. I'll add another little fun fact here, Nathan, in that Bloomberg Intelligence is flagging the point that there's still scrutiny around this. There's still regulation around some of these self-driving vehicles, and the robo-taxi in particular. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, according to Bloomberg Intelligence, has an annual production limit of 2,500 steering wheel-free vehicles. So that's going to get in the way at the moment of mass production of this.
And that gets to some of the unanswered questions that we're still waiting to hear answers for after this event. Not only how Elon Musk and Tesla make the leap from assisted driving that they still haven't quite fully mastered, and to the price point when they haven't even put out a sub $30,000 drivable vehicle.
The timing is also another kind of volatile factor here because, yes, there are plenty of unveilings coming out of Tesla, but Elon Musk and his design team has a history of going far past the timeline that they suggest. So if he's talking about 2 short years, there's a lot of questions about, well, can you actually get to those 2 years? Not just in terms of the Cybercab, but also in terms of the other product, which is the Cyber van. Really looks like an Art Deco bus for those who've looked at that visual.
Yeah. Pretty soon the conversation is going to turn from the future of EV autonomy to the present of big banks. What are we expecting in our last minute here from JPMorgan Chase and Wells Fargo today?
Well, we're expecting some sort of gauge on the consumer. Look, we know that the IPO market isn't doing that well. We know that capital markets activity has kind of slowed down. We also know that a lot of these trading profits have come from the volatility that you're going to see. That's not going to slow down going into the election, Nathan. What is going to happen, though, is a little bit more clarity on the consumer. It's all eyes on what Jamie Dimon is going to be saying around that. Do you still see that consumer support, or are geopolitics going to be weighing on that sentiment? That's I think, what we're watching for this morning.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak, your morning podcast on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 92.9 in Boston, and nationwide on Sirius XM Channel 121.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto interfaces.
And don't forget to subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. It's the latest news whenever you want it, in 5 minutes or less. Search Bloomberg News Now on your favorite podcast platform to stay informed all day long. I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.